It's interesting how the most effective ways that I have found to change and adapt and make positive changes in training when you plateau, they really have nothing to do with methodology and they have everything to do with psychology. It's always been like that.
That's funny you say that. I just had this conversation with a client recently about that exact same thing. There's a point where, if you have so many people under you, a few of them, let's say they struggle or they stagnate or whatever, there's a point where a couple I've had to say, like, honestly, there's no other wizardry I can pull from my end. There's no magic arrangement of sets, reps, exercise selection. No matter what, if there is a barrier with your psychology, with recovery, with eating, with just simple dedication, wanting it bad enough, being willing to prioritize that over other things. If that roadblock comes up, it's going to happen with every program you do. And it's also funny you mentioned that as far as kind of backing off, taking your foot off the gas or focusing on something else, because I feel like people intuitively think that once you hit that plateau or once things stop getting fun and you're grinding, that you just have to hit the gas a little harder, go a little more. And then eventually, if for whatever reason, even when life forces you to just pull back a little bit, it becomes fun again. You approach it from new angles. You're willing to try new things. You're not, white knuckling your training. That it's a very important lesson. I think a lot of people miss when they're just so eager to milk themselves for everything they have because you have a short window for performance.
People just, they clamor to the idea of optimization and finding what's optimal and reaching their genetic limit and all this thing. And they feel that the path that they're on is the only real way because they've seen improvements before and they know that it's harder to see improvements again. So they just have to work harder. It's not really the common thread that we always hear. It's like work smarter, not harder. It's not always that. It's like trick yourself. Just trick yourself constantly. That's what coaching always was for me, is always just tricking my athletes. Just like, how do I get them to not give a shit? Or how do I get them to not think? How do I get them to, so many times, man, especially in weightlifting. Weightlifting is a weird sport because people will miss reps that they've hit before all the time. And then they'll get in their head and then it's very psychological because it's so technical, and I'll do is I'll break them down. I will literally be like, let's put less weight on the bar and we're going to do this drill. And the drill, might be like a tempo snatch where you pull very slowly off the floor and then you explode, or it might be like a low hang snatch and a bunch of different things. And what that does is it just takes their mind off of the actual technical, requirements of the snatch all in succession. You got to remember to do this all at one time. And they think about the bounds of the drill. They think about what the drill requires of you. And it adds in these governors. And now that they're thinking about that, slowly the weight starts coming up and they get to the weight or they surpass the weight that they were missing before. You see that I had nothing to do with that. It's just a switch. It's just a psychological switch. So the more that I can kind of teach people to do that themselves, the better. Sometimes, and I think very rarely, you have to try to break your head through the wall. Sometimes you got to be like, I just failed. I'm going to sit here and I know there's a door right there, but I'm going to smash my head into this wall until it fucking breaks through the other side. Those are important sessions and it's hard to know when they come, but it absolutely needs to happen, especially in weightlifting.
That was going to be my next question, was how you gauge that reliably, because there's a point, it's like imposter syndrome aside, there's a point where you're sitting there with all these variables and you're like, I could recommend this person tough it out, and worst case scenario, it's like a learning experience or something. It's like you learn from your failures just as much, but then you're trying to do the odds, right? And figure out, okay, after over so many people, he's probably going to be best off rolling back or doing something like a wave, or like you said, drilling and then building back up to try and get over the yips. Do you have like something you look for to be like, you're ready to just put your head down and push through?
Yeah, if I see that there's enough power in the, like if the athlete's fired up, like I can tell if an athlete has it on that day and they're just not putting it all together. And so there was an athlete at the gym. He was doing deadlifts, and he did 220 for a double, and he smoked it. He's never done 227 before, which is 500 pounds. So he puts 227 on and he just fails. And it's like, I'm not going to baby you. Like, you need to fucking make this. There's absolutely no excuse. I kind of like didn't yell at him, but I was like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Like, do something, like, make it so your life depends on it. Like, there's no, I cannot baby you. I cannot tell you a drill. I can't give you something here. Like, you just gotta take it. There's always that moment where it's has nothing to do with almost like what you're capable of. It's more about like, okay, I have to perform. You know, that's, and for some people who've never competed in sport before, that is very, very difficult, right? Like, the coolest thing about progressive overload is that, like, you never have to perform. Progressive overload just does it for you. You know, you're like, wow, I did 100 kilos back squat for 5 reps. I've never been able to do that before. It's highly likely that I'm going to be able to do 110 kilos, which is a PR for a single, right?
Mhm.
But like, what about 120? What about 125? What about 130? Like, that's not going to happen because progressive overload says it has to happen. It's only going to happen because you make it happen and you want to perform at the time when everyone's watching, when your coach is watching. That is something that I grew up fucking living for. Like, in every aspect of my life, all I wanted to do was perform. That's it. And it's like an ego thing, of course. Like, but that was what sport was for me, whether it was baseball, track and field, lacrosse, football, basketball, swimming and diving. I wanted people to watch me, you know, and ever since that's what gave me some sort of edge in weightlifting for someone who's 6'4" with a 6'7" wingspan, who has no place, you know, in this sport, at least at the time frame than when I did it, when I learned how to do it, all these, you know, extenuating circumstances. But that is what carried into the performance aspect. And that is one of the times where it's like, you know, I can baby you, I can bring you back down, I can re-warm you up, I can trick you, but like, there has to be a gamer mentality. You have to want to win.
And this field, whether you're any like competitive barbell sport or any like kind of offshoot of that, it's so much rooted in like a recreational consumer culture, which is fine because people are best suited like taking it as far as they can, even if they're not directly competitive. And everybody's going to be able to do better than if they just sat their asses on the couch. But there's this fixation that everybody has on like the top 1% of 1%. And everybody feels like they're on track. Like, it's just a matter of time. That sporting background is so huge. It's like you can weed people out just by like your onboarding questionnaire of who's played a competitive sport and who hasn't, who has like a mentality of holding themselves accountable or of wanting to drive forward and perform, and who's just trying to take up time after work before they have to go home, or who's just, you know, my buddies do this, so I do this. And that's something that doesn't get talked about enough, because all the different fixations on like programs or styles of training, you know, this like exercise of the week that's going to be popular for a short period of time that everybody's going to put on Instagram. It's so much more important to get to that, you know, root cause. Like, so when you're lying in bed before you go to sleep, are you thinking about your workout tomorrow? You know, when you're supposed to be like writing out your TPS reports, are you like scribbling matrices of like rep PRs to see what that correlates to as a max? Or is it an afterthought until you get to the gym and you're like, well, I'm as prepared as I'm going to be? And it's unfortunate because I mean, I think the average person could do so much more, but
So like that idea, it manifests in aggression. So the performance aspect, especially in weightlifting, and I think powerlifting, maybe strongman, there's a switch that you can visually see. I don't, it's hard. It's kind of like this je ne sais quoi. I can't like really describe it, but there's an aggression in snatching and clean and jerking that I can see that's a competitor, regardless of their competitive background. So I have seen guys who've never competed before, but they have this switch, boom, they can just smash the bar, and they have some sort of, and it's women too. Like I can see it in them. That is the thing that will carry over to performance. And that's what we see in barbell sport. Okay. But like I said before, people want progressive overload is so great. It's like, the adaptation is just going to carry me wherever I need to go. And I can just passively go through this workout. And that's true. You absolutely can. But you can do crazier shit that you never thought you could if you just, I don't know, learn how to perform. And like it's learning how to perform, learning how to be a gamer is so vital. And yeah, I think I don't know. Is there something like that in strongman, that the aggression?
oh,
thing?
completely. And it comes a few different ways because strongman encompasses so many different energy systems. But I was just relating that because you have Olympic lifting, so the precision and the speed. So of course there's transfer. It's why it's the backbone of all athletic strength programs. There's transfer to anything that benefits from a singular impulse where you really only have one shot to get it right. Once you get into the strength side of things, and I haven't really heard it described this way a lot, so it kind of clicked when I first heard it. But instead of training, strength or power, whatever, training to strain, like with the deadlift, right? I mean, psyching up for a big deadlift, especially when you know it's there and you kind of whiff at the start, or when you don't really stick with it, when it's slowing down around your knees, that's a different mentality than when you have to pop something off, with everything you have in 1 second and do it just so, because if you get a little bit out of position, you're just screwed. In strongman, God, I'm trying to think, like it's strain plus time. So that is like a recipe for pain. So everything's density, right? So it's a deadlift for reps, but hey, it's on an axle, so there's no flex. It's a minute. So you stop and start as you go. So instead of one set that might last 10 or 15 seconds, you're doing like, a rest pause set, basically. There's long carries, there's Husfeld carries. And some of the more explosive or strong athletes actually really struggle with their capacity. So when you take something like a 400-pound Husfeld stone, you have to pick up. And the guys that are winning are going 250, 300 feet with it. And you might be the biggest deadlifter there. But if all you know is that pop, that snap, that singular impulse, guys have a real hard time getting in that headspace, because instead of the aggression, it has to be more like, precision meets aggression, like that intersection where you're in the zone, athletic performance kicks up. You have to be calm enough to keep your wind, but aggressive enough to move the implement. So yeah, it gets very different, very specific to the event.